So, I think it was 6 months ago, Michael put out this video from Olive Branch Fellowship. You should probably go over there, but this specifically is talking about probably three or four different times the charismatic movement. And so we're just going to mirror his video and post it up here so that you guys can hear what the Bible has to say about the charismatic movement. This video is called The Living Word.
Okay, everyone, Shabbat Shalom. And I have a feeling that today I may go on long. So we're just going to get really stuck in really straight away. This is a follow-on teaching from the teaching I did 2 weeks ago, the Spirit Man. It's going to be a follow-on from that. I got some really good feedback, actually, from that teaching, the Spirit Man teaching, and it was people were blessed by it. But obviously, because we were dealing with the more spiritual side of things, a few comments kind of came my way of, well, what does this look like in real life? How does this apply in my life in a more practical, three-dimensional thing? And just some of the discussions I've had over, the last couple of weeks. And the Ruach really led me to this place of, let's focus on the more practical aspect of this Spirit Man teaching. So just for a quick reminder, this is essentially the Spirit Man teaching summed up in one slide. We saw how obviously what we are is his spirit in combination with our soul. Okay, this is who you are, and that's housed within a body, a fallen flesh suit, as it were. We saw how the body and the soul are both fallen. It's obvious that the body's fallen. It dies. But it's obvious that our soul, our mind, our heart is fallen too, right? The heart is desperately sick. Who can know it? The blood of Messiah cleanses the conscience, okay? Just a quick reminder that the mind, the heart, the soul, the emotions is all the same thing Hebraically. It's all this place here. And we saw that it's at the soul level that the battle between the flesh and the spirit occurs. What will you choose is essentially the battle that we are all experiencing. What will you choose? And at this soul level, this is where you have things like the battleground of the mind, matters of the heart. Why do you go about certain things the way you do? Matters of headship, authority, your motives and desires for your actions. This is where it's all wrestled at. And one of the ending notes of the Spirit Man teaching, I said, is that our King gave us discipleship due to our fallen state. Why? Because at this that more intimate place, this is where we can work these things out. And again, I'm going to give some more practical examples today. I'm not going to sit here and give you every possible scenario that I can conjure up in my mind. I'm going to give you principles that are applicable and, should be easy to apply to other things. I also mentioned this, you will only get out of it what you put in. So remember that at the soul level, you have to open yourself up. And, a lot of us have been burnt in the past, so we have to choose who we open up to carefully. but you'll only get out of it what you put in. If you're going to put up the walls, don't expect anything to change, right? So really, that's what we covered last week. So what does this actually look like in 3 dimensions? In this, in this realm, so to speak. This was the verse, and I mentioned this last week, but this is the verse that really kickstarted this conversation, this teaching. Hebrews 4:12, for the word of Elohim is living, and the word and sharper than any two-edged sword, cutting through even to the dividing of being and spirit, or soul and spirit, and of joints and marrow, and able to judge the thoughts and intentions of the heart. And there is no creature hidden from his sight, but all are naked and laid bare before the eyes of him with whom is our account. Now, last week we covered this verse just purely to kind of show that there is a difference between the being, the soul, and the spirit, because Hebrews is very clearly saying there's a division between the two. Now, one of the statements I made in the Spirit Man teaching, I kind of said it, and it really kind of started me thinking down this road, is this thing of the word has to become living. It's the living word that divides between soul and spirit. It's the living word that judges the thoughts and intentions of the heart. Now, it's only when the word becomes living in our lives that the work on the heart begins. Because notice here that it's saying that the living word is able to divide between soul and spirit. It's able to tell you whether remember what we said, that you have the soul in the middle, and the soul is where this battle between flesh and spirit occurs. It's almost like the interface between the two. And the word, when it becomes living, will be able to tell whether your being, your soul, is being submitted to the spirit or whether it's being submitted to the flesh, and all the many ways that takes hold. And when the word becomes living, it's actually able to judge the thoughts and intentions of the heart. So again, it's this, what are your motivations? What are your desires? Why do you do certain things? Why do you react certain ways? Why do you put up a wall? Why do you get triggered? On and on and on. But for that to occur, the word has to become living. If it's just ink on a page, it's just ink on a page, right? And this was the verses that got me thinking. Okay, in John chapter 5, I'm going to read 2 verses from this to make the point, but then at the end of the teaching, we're going to come back to the greater context of this teaching, of this passage. John 5:39, you search the scriptures because you think you possess everlasting life in them, and these are the ones that bear witness of me. But you do not desire to come to me in order to possess life. Who was Yeshua aiming this at? If you read up, it's the Pharisees, the scribes, and so forth. So these were very knowledgeable people, probably, I would argue, more knowledgeable than any of us in matters of Torah and the prophets. And Yeshua is saying you search these scriptures because you think they will bring you life. And he's saying that, look, in modern lingo, he's saying, okay, great, you've got knowledge, you've got the written word, but has it become living? Has it become living? Is the fruit of that knowledge manifesting in your life? And Yeshua is essentially saying, well, I don't think it is. I call your bluff, Pharisees. Why? Because you do not desire to come to me. These scriptures, I am the fulfillment of these scriptures, he's saying. And you're not willing to come to me. So even our king is saying, okay, there's this written word, but it's supposed to do something. There's another step beyond. And again, remember my statement, the word has to become living, okay? In 2 Corinthians 3, so Paul is speaking to the Corinthians here. Are we to begin to recommend ourselves again? Or do we need, as some, letters of recommendation to you or from you? Now, I don't want to get too much into this, but go read the first Corinthians. We find out that Paul says you've got someone in your midst that's got his father's wife. What are you doing still entertaining him? You need to take him out of the congregation so that he comes to repentance, right? And then in 2 Corinthians, you find out actually that this guy has come to repentance, and Paul says, okay, you've dealt out the discipline, bring him back in. You've already been hard enough on him, right? Now, when you understand fellowship dynamics and you've had to go through these things within a wider assembly, sometimes the removal of people cause into question the leader's authority, or people start to doubt, or they start to accuse, all kinds of stuff. So Paul is saying, like, do we need to recommend ourselves to you? Again, do we need some kind of letter of recommendation? So you can see there's been not an attack, but there's been an undermining of Paul's authority to the Corinthians. And I can guarantee you it was because of Paul saying you need to remove this guy. Okay, someone would have got offended. And he says, you are our letter, having been written in our hearts, known and read by all men, making it obvious that you are a letter of Messiah, served by us, written not with ink, but by the Spirit of the living Elohim, not on tablets of stone, but on fleshly tablets of heart. Paul is saying, guys, look in your midst. Look at all the good fruit that's come in the midst under our guidance, right? And again, he's saying, look, we didn't do this. We're just the vessels, and we'll read this as we go on. But Paul's saying, look at the fruit in your lives up until this point. Why do we need to recommend ourselves to you? Now, Paul is making this reference here. We'll get to that. Such trust we have toward Elohim through the Messiah. Not that we are competent in ourselves to reckon any matter as from ourselves, but our competence is from Elohim. So again, any good fruit that's come as a result of Paul and his other people is because of Elohim working through them. He's given the glory where it's due, but again, he was the vessel. So he needs to be given the respect as such. Who also made us competent as servants of a renewed covenant, not of the letter, but of the Spirit. For the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life. Now, this could become a whole teaching in of itself, but notice what Paul, look, when he's talking of the letter, yes, he's talking of the Torah. He's talking of the law. I'm sorry to say this, he is. But Paul is making this distinction, like there's the written word, or the word written on tablets of stone, and then there's the Spirit that gives life, and this is equated to the tablets of the heart. If we just go back here, look, here, you are the letter of Messiah, served by us, written not with ink, but by the Spirit of the living Elohim, not on tablets of stone, but on fleshly tablets of heart. Okay? And then he says the letter kills, but it's the Spirit that gives life. And again, I believe Paul is essentially saying to the Corinthians, look, guys, it's not just about blind obedience or ticking a box with you guys. You've got the fruit of it. The Spirit has been bringing the word to life, and you're reaping the rewards of it. Remember this before you turn against us because of what's gone on in Corinth. Now, Paul is actually referencing Ezekiel 36, right? The tablets of stone, tablets of heart, the Spirit, the renewed covenant. He's actually referencing Ezekiel 36. Let's quickly read 3 verses from Ezekiel 36. This is in the context of the fulfillment of the renewed covenant. I shall sprinkle clean water on you, and you shall be clean. From all your filthiness and from all your idols I cleanse you. And I shall give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. And I shall take the heart of stone out of your flesh, and I shall give you a heart of flesh, and put my spirit within you. And I shall cause you to walk in my laws and guard my right rulings, and shall do them. So this is what Paul's referencing, and he's saying to the Corinthians, look, you're the evidence. You don't need a letter of recommendation. You're the evidence that Elohim has been working through us. And he's using this as the backdrop for it. Now, even in this passage, I believe it's saying that the Torah will become living through his people. Notice where the Torah is written. It's no longer on tablets of stone, or in modern speak, ink on a page, right? But it's living. Why? Because it's written on the heart. The mouth speaks from the overflow of the heart. Your actions come from the overflow of the heart. And he's saying that once his spirit is in us and the word is written on tablets of heart, well, then the outcome will be that we will walk in his laws and guard his right rulings. This is how the Torah shall go forth from Zion. Okay? It's not like there's going to be tablets of stone sent out to every city. It will become living through the people. Why? Because it's written on the heart. So I bring these passages up to show that the word needs to become living. It's no good having just a Bible in front of you and it's not going in. And I'm not talking within just knowledge here. Now, there is a process to this. In Romans 10:14, how then shall they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how shall they believe in him of whom they have not heard? And how shall they hear without one proclaiming? And how shall they proclaim if they are not sent? So then, belief or faith comes by hearing. In hearing, by the word of Elohim. It's giving you a three-stage process here. First, you need the written word, right? Because someone needs to have that written word internalized in front of them so they can go and proclaim it, right? So you have the word of Elohim. Then you need to hear it. Now remember that in Hebraic culture, hear and do, shema, right? So like you need to hear and you need to do, which means there's a process that's happened between the hearing and doing. And then once you've heard it and you are doing it, then that becomes faith, okay? Paul's telling you there's a process here. So let's break this process down. Because remember, faith is spiritual. Hearing to Shema, this is happening within your soul level, okay? And the one sent out to proclaim, well, you're hearing that in the flesh, okay? So let's look at this process. So remember we had body, soul, spirit, right? In the body, in the flesh, there's the written word, okay? We hear it, we read it, we talk about it, right? But it's still at that fleshly kind of three-dimensional place, okay? Once we hear the word, once we audibly heard it, then we need to go between this battle between hearing and doing to Shema. It's at the soul level that you wrestle with the word and learn to apply it, okay? Because look, we've all heard the commandment, thou shalt keep the Sabbath, right? You shall have the seventh day set apart. So you've heard the written word. Well, now you need to wrestle with it, and then you need to learn how to apply it. You know, oh no, what am I going to do about my job? Oh no, right, there's this wrestling that goes on. And then it's like, well, how do I keep it? What can I do this? Can I do that, right? So you have this wrestling and application of the word. And once you get and push through that and you overcome, then you get to see the fruit of it. And you get to, and I've put here walking in the spirit, or think of it as walking in newness of life. And I'll give some more concrete examples to make the point. Think of this written word. Remember that the Torah is a shadow of the good matters to come, not the image itself of the matters, as Hebrews would say. So the Torah is a shadow picture. It's knowledge. It's still in that knowledge space, right? Once you read that and you have the knowledge, and then you have to work the matter through. You wrestle with it at the soul level. And once you've wrestled with it, and maybe you've gone and sought some accountability on it, and maybe you've gone to seek for wise counsel, then you learn to apply it. Shema, right? Hear and do. I believe that the wrestling is what occurs between the hearing and the doing. Okay? And the more you do, the more then it becomes evidence of fruit in one's life. Okay, so you see this three-tiered process, and I believe it marries up perfectly with body or flesh, soul, spirit. Right, the keeping Shabbat example. I was just alluding to this a few seconds ago. We've all had to read the Ten Commandments, and we come across commandment number 4. And it says, you shall keep the Sabbath day holy, or set apart. Some of you really wrestled with that. Okay, you really, really wrestled with that. Now, here's the thing. Was Is it about the keeping the Shabbat holy, or is it what it exposes? And what I mean by that is, so the command is very clear. You shall keep the seventh day set apart. You shall do no work. Well, what does that expose in you? What do you have to wrestle and contend with? Well, I work on Saturdays. What if I lose my job? And if I lose my job, how am I going to pay my bills? And what is that exposing? Do you fear man? Have you made wealth your idol? Oh, but this is when I have my favorite tennis club. I can't give up my tennis club or my football club or whatever it is. Well, what is it exposing? Do you have an idol in your life? So the written word of you shall keep the Sabbath, you then hear that, you wrestle with it, and you apply it. Now, I think it's safe to say most of you tuning in, now you've overcome this stage and you now walk in the Spirit. You're walking in newness of life. You know the blessing of the Sabbath. In fact, you look forward to it. You're counting down the days until the Sabbath, right? Now, here's the thing. Some people will keep the Sabbath, but purely from that. They'll keep it from a place of self-righteousness, right? Well, I keep the Sabbath. I keep the Sabbath, don't you know? I keep it better than you do. Look at how well I switched all my lights off and how well I don't turn on my micro, on and on and on and on, which means that now you're keeping the Sabbath from a fleshly point of view. Well, if it's staying in this realm, what's not occurring? The wrestling, the application. And remember, it's at this place, at the soul level, that the sanctification of the heart occurs. It's at this level where you choose between flesh and spirit. Okay? So the written commandment to keep the Sabbath holy may expose fear of losing your job, lack of trust in Elohim. It may expose that you have an idol in your life, and you have to wrestle with that. And once you overcome that, you now get to walk in newness of life. And not only that, you now then get to pass that on to others. I hope that makes sense. It's a really good example to make the point. Right, let's use headship and design as an example. Scripture is pretty clear that the husband is the head of the family, right? Now, let's say the husband, let's say the marriage is upside down, the woman's leading, okay? So the written word is saying, men, you are to be the heads of your households. Now, you hear that, and then you have to wrestle with it. Well, why is the marriage upside down? Is it because the husband is shirking his responsibility? Maybe he's too afraid of making mistakes, right? Because if he makes a decision, he understands that his wife and kids will reap the consequences. Maybe he's too scared to make a mistake. Or, on the other side of it, maybe he just, he wants all the trimmings and blessings of marriage without the responsibility. There's three different things that it could be. Look, there's hundreds and hundreds of reasons why marriage will be upside down. But the written word is exposing something in that marriage. Or maybe the husband has shirked his responsibility, therefore the wife, she's only stepping up because if she doesn't, everybody suffers. You know, there's that side of it. Maybe she is genuinely usurping. And like, again, on and on and on. I could give you hundreds of examples, but the written word of the order and design and headship design of Elohim's design is exposing something. Or maybe the wife has got the modern feminist narrative in her mind. Maybe she's allowed Rome to pollute her mind. You know, maybe the husband is taking his headship and he's actually ruling with an iron rod instead of loving and cherishing his wife. Again, wrestling and application. But when a marriage does start to function biblically, oh boy, does that couple now start to walk in newness of life? The blessings that come from being in his order, right? I could use a fellowship, you know, a headship can apply at the fellowship level, at the assembly level. It's all the same principle. So notice the written word will expose something in our souls. Look, this is why Hebrews says the living word is able to divide even between soul and spirit, right? At the soul level, are you going towards the flesh or are you going towards the spirit, okay? So these are two really good examples of how the word becomes living in our life. And once we've wrestled and overcome, and then we get to see the fruit of it, right? By the way, this wrestling, again, what does it mean to be Israel, right? Why was Yaakov, renamed into Israel? Because he wrestled and he contended and he overcame. You can't manufacture or make up the process. You can try, but you're only fooling yourself. This is the process that Yah has laid out clearly in the scripture. This is the process. And remember, Yeshua says, I'm the door. Anyone that comes in another way is a thief and a destroyer. Like, this is the process. We can't go around it. Oh boy, people do try. Okay, Elohim's way versus the adversary's way. Elohim's way is there's the written word, and then you wrestle with it, and you overcome, thus becoming Israel, thus you walk in the spirit, thus you walk in newness of life. What the adversary will do is he takes out this section. So I've put here Yeshua's temptation. Yeshua's temptation, or one of them, the final one, was bow down before me and I will give you all the kingdoms of the earth, right? Now, here's the thing. Yeshua had to come in the flesh, die, resurrect, so that he could be found worthy, right? He had to overcome in the flesh at the cost of his life to be resurrected so that all authority could be given to him, right? Yeshua had to go through this wrestling, this overcoming thing, so that he could have the reward at the end, so to speak. Now, what the adversary is doing is saying, let me give you the goodie bag. It's going to be it's not quite the goodie bag, but it's near enough the goodie bag, right? This bit, I will give it to you without you having to wrestle, without you having to overcome. Just do this in the flesh right now. Bow down to me. And the adversary, he will always try to give you a version of the goodie bag, so to speak, without going through this wrestling, this application, and without overcoming, right? This is the adversary's way. And you see this clearly demonstrated in Yeshua's temptation. Religion will make it all about the sanctification of the flesh. Remember, so going back to the spirit man teaching, we covered that your flesh has to die. It will die. Even our king, who did not sin in the flesh, his flesh still had to die. Why? Because the flesh itself had death in it, right? The flesh suit that our king was wearing was fallen. But what part of him did not fall? It was this part, his soul. He did not sin. He did not sin. The flesh suit he was wearing, though, contained death. Let's be honest, right? Religion will make it all about this. Don't wear your hair this long. Ladies, don't cut your hair short. Ladies, you got to wear skirts, not trousers. Make sure your zits are half a meter long. This many knots. This pronunciation of the Messiah's name. This pronunciation of the creed. Do you know what I mean? On and on and on and on and on. And it's all in this space here. And if you're keeping this space here, you're being kept in that space, what's not happening? You are not wrestling. You are not overcoming. You are not having the sanctification of the heart. You're not having the circumcision of the heart, aka the renewing of the mind. Okay? And this is why religion is very dangerous. And I mean religion very loosely. And I mean both sides. Both sides. Okay? And what the enemy will do, he'll give you the goodie bag, this, without wrestling. How does this manifest? Here are some of the dangers of staying in the shadow picture. Now, what I mean here is staying focused on the written word, it not going to that soul level, so something happens here, the process gets hijacked. What are the dangers of staying in this place? Well, first of all, no heart circumcision, right? Trying to pick fruit off the shadow. So we're told that if we do things the Father's way, we will bear good fruit, right? Now, what's the analogy being given here? That there's a tree with fruit on it. Now, the tree is casting a shadow. Okay, think of that. And remember that the Torah is the shadow of the good matters to come, not the image itself, right? So what happens is that people are focused on the shadow picture, and they're trying to pick the fruit off the shadow. Go and do that next time you see a fruit tree in summer. Go try to pick the apples off the shadow being cast on the ground. You'll be there for a while. And people can actually become disillusioned with their faith because they're doing all this stuff and they're going, well, why am I still the same? And the other flip side of that is that because they sense this, they go with the delusion, which leads you to manufacturing or even making up the fruit. So I'm going to give an example for each side of the river here. Charismania. We want to walk in the Spirit, but we're not going to wrestle with the word and truly seek out what it says. I want the goodie bag because it makes me feel good in the flesh. It's all emotional. It's all based on flesh and sensation. And I feel, right? You hear this a lot. I feel in my spirit, or my heart resonates. It's all feelings based. It's all emotion based. And actually, women are more prone to picking this kind of stuff up because of their design. So what happens is that people manufacture the fruit of the Spirit or the gifts of the Spirit in their life. Why? Because they've not undergone this. Notice that a lot of the charismatic stuff is very emotionally driven. Why? Because it's from the flesh. Now let's go on the other side of the river. Let's say the Messianic Torah side. One of the ways this manifests is, I understand my doctrine, therefore I must be in a good spiritual place. Just because you understand doctrine and scripture does not mean you're in a good place. It just means you understand doctrine. And again, people will hide behind the written word without having gone the wrestling and the application. So they're making up the fruit. I have knowledge, therefore I must be walking in the Spirit. Do you see how this manifests on both sides? And this is why I can't go through every single possible hypothetical situation. I can only give you the principles. Now, because the written word is not going to the heart level, it means that the word doesn't become living in your life. If the word doesn't become living in your life, it means you don't have the good fruit associated with it. So what do? You either manufacture it or you make it up in according to your own understanding. Oh, you're now making things up in your own understanding. What does that sound like? We'll get to that. This is the definition of having the appearance of godliness but denying its power. What is the power of our faith? Yes, it's our King, it's his Spirit, but specifically, it's that a wretch like me can be turned into something else. That's the power of the faith. Look, some of us had some very colourful pasts. And what happened? There was a change. Why? Because we heard or read the written word, we wrestled with it, and we overcame certain things, and now that word's become living in our life. It's no longer just ink on a page. But if you stay focused in this place, and it's very easy to hide behind. Why? Because it's pleasing to the flesh. You will have the appearance of godliness but deny its power, which means that you will not be changing. You will not be seeing the fruit of your life. This results in you creating Elohim in your own image. Why? Because you're manufacturing or making up the fruit. You're actually making it up. You're saying, this is the faith, and I'm doing great. Thank you very much. You're creating Elohim in your own image. So again, let's use the charismatics. They're creating Elohim in their own image. That Yah would give them the full power of the Ruach, even though that they're not mature enough spiritually to handle it. And this is why then people make it up, right? By the way, the world sees through this very quickly. And here's the problem, like, there'll be people in the charismatic movement, they know not to make up the fruit. But because they've got nothing to go to, like, all they know is this denomination. They're looking at the people and they're going, well, why are they getting it and I'm not? And then you fall into self-condemnation. This is why I say that leave the charismatic thing long enough, two outcomes. Either you delude yourself with it or you fall into self-condemnation. Now let's go to the other side. Messianic, knowledge-based, that kind of Gnostic space. Oh, yeah. Look, we all know people that are very knowledgeable, but their face looks like they're sucking a sour lemon, like that. And there's no heart change, and there's no character change. There's, and you see that they don't have peace. Again, but they're saying, "Oh yeah, I'm in the faith." What you risk doing is actually bringing Yah's name to naught. You risk bearing His name in vain. Remember that people we're meant to be a light on a hill. People are supposed to look at us and go, wow, what is it that they've got that I don't have? But unfortunately, because religion has kept us in this place, all about the flesh, the world looks in and they go, I'm all right, thank you very much. You don't have anything that I already don't have. And thus, all the bad fruit comes in. And, as Yeshua says, you shall know them by their fruit. He doesn't say you shall know them by their knowledge. He says you'll know them by their fruit. And he also says the world will know you're my disciples by the love you have for one another. You shall know them by their fruit. We like to make that about them. Whoever them are, right? Normally we point the fingers at the Roman. This is speaking of believers. Go look at the context. And do not start pointing at Christianity either. Point the finger back at you. What's the fruit in your life? Because honestly, I have a lot of people come to me and sometimes I'm listening and I'm thinking, well, where's the fruit? And I'm not talking prosperity here. This is not what I'm talking about. And we'll get to one of the biggest fruits. Peace or the lack thereof. Proverbs 3, my son, do not forget my Torah and let your heart watch over my commands. For length of days and long life and peace they add to you. Well, Michael, I'm keeping the Torah. You need to keep reading. You drop down to verse 16. It now starts speaking about wisdom. Length of days is in her right hand, riches and esteem in her left hand. Her ways are pleasant ways, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those taking hold of her, and blessed are all who retain her. The word has to become living so that it's no longer knowledge, it's now wisdom. There's a big difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge misapplied is very destructive sometimes. Okay? Notice, this is going to become clearer. But notice it's not just about knowing the Torah, it's about it becoming wisdom. She is a tree of life to those taking hold of her. The word here is chazak. Those of you who know some Hebrew may know what this means already. The written word has to become living, wisdom and authority. Remember what I said, let's use the Shabbat example. You heard the word. Some of you had to put your faith in Elohim because you may have lost your job. You learned to not trust in your bank account. You learned to not, do you know what I mean? All this stuff. You've come out the other side, and now you have authority to be able to speak into someone who's struggling with that now. It's not just head knowledge. You can go, brother, sister, I know what you're going through. I know what it's like to worry about your financial situation. I know what it feels like that it's all going to slip away, but have faith, right? It's a lot better hearing that from someone who's been through it. Again, same with marriage. You know, if marriages have got issues, well, you don't go to another dysfunctional couple now for wisdom, do you? You go to someone where you can see the fruit. Now, this word, chazak, taking hold, to fasten, to seize, to be strong, to be courageous. This is what Moshe says to Joshua when he says, be strong and courageous, do not fear. He's using chazak v'chazaka. So be courageous, like, look at this, to bind, to restrain, to conquer. It almost sounds like wrestling a little bit, doesn't it? Like, you've got to take hold of it. You've got to strengthen it. Like, and remember what it said. Not only do you have to take hold of wisdom, you have to retain her. Like, there's this active wrestling going on. Now, here's what's interesting. It can also mean to be obstinate. So you can see which way are you going to go. What are you going to strengthen yourself in? Are you going to strengthen yourself in the faith and in the spirit, or are you going to strengthen yourself in your flesh? La, 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 right? Psalm 119, 165, great peace of those loving your Torah, and for them there is no stumbling block. Wow, Michael, I keep the Torah. Like, again, the word has to become living for this statement to be true. Notice it says loving the Torah, right? For you to love something as David is meaning it here, it has to be written on your heart. Remember, the letter kills, but the spirit gives life. Why does David love the Torah? Because it's given him newness of life. Go read all of Psalm 119. It's not about, like, remember what I said. If you're keeping the commands from just a box-ticking exercise so that you can puff yourself up with self-righteousness, you're deluding yourself. You're in the flesh, and the flesh will kill. There's no heart renewing going on. Here's the thing. What if one is creating Elohim in their own image? Having an appearance of godliness but denying its power. Oh, they have the knowledge. Oh, they've made up the fruit and gifts of the Spirit, right? But you're creating Elohim in your own image. That means that you have no peace and that you are a stumbling block. Think about this. Who here has seen a Torah Nazi be a stumbling block to someone? Why? Because they're in the flesh. The appearance of godliness denying its power. That's why they're being a Torah Nazi, because it's not renewed their heart. They're still the same arrogant, proudful, boastful jerk, right? But the only thing that's changed is that they now wear tzitzit and they've grown their beard out. This is why David says this in Psalm 139, search me, O El, and know my heart, my mind, my soul. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if an idolatrous way is in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Why would King David, who loves the Torah, be worried that he's got an idolatrous way in him? And David never bowed down to idols that we read of. What if he was creating Elohim in his own image? Look, think of the Bathsheba incident and all the mental gymnastics that he would have had to make up in his mind to justify his actions. It's not like he couldn't control his carnal desire. He wrestled with it in the mind, and he became obstinate, and he reasoned it all away. He was being idolatrous in his heart. He was now bringing Yah's name to nothing, having the appearance of blood. He was acting in the flesh. Isaiah 50, I hope people can really see that this is how subtle it can be. Because when you stay in the flesh and that word is not becoming living, you're marching towards a very subtle form of idolatry, where you're creating Elohim in your own image, and actually the idol is self. I feel good about my knowledge, or I feel good about my so-called gifts of the Spirit. It's a form of idolatry. When you cry out, by the way, this is aimed at Israel, this passage. When you cry out, let your collection of idols deliver you. But the wind shall bear them all away, and a breath take them. But he who takes refuge in me shall inherit the land and possess my set-apart mountain. And one shall say, heap it up, prepare the way, take the stumbling block out of the way of my people. Now, what is the stumbling block? People will say that the stumbling block is actually the idols. What did we read earlier? Great peace of those loving your Torah, and there is no stumbling block for them. Let me phrase it this way. Who are the stumbling blocks? Maybe those creating Elohim in their own image? Interesting. And this fits, like, what does Ezekiel say? In Ezekiel 20, verse 37, I think it is, they will be a tithe of the flock, and the rebels will be purged from his people. They will be gathered out the nations, but they won't be given an inheritance in the land. Who are the stumbling blocks? Those creating Elohim in their own image. But thus declares the high and exalted one who dwells forever, whose name is set apart. I dwell in the high and set apart place with him who has a bruised and humble spirit, to revive the spirit of the humble and to revive the heart of the bruised ones. You're seeing humility and repentance in these verses. And one of the things of people staying within the flesh, watch it long enough, you will see pride come out. And we'll get to these examples later. You'll actually see a stiff neck, an inability to heed reproof or counsel sometimes as well. For I would not strive forever, nor am I wroth forever, for the spirit will grow faint before me, even the beings I have made. For the crookedness of his unfair gain, I was wroth, and I struck him. He's speaking of Jacob here, Yaakov, Israel. So all 12 tribes. I hid myself and was wroth, and he went on backsliding in the way of his heart. I have seen his ways, but now I heal him, and I lead him and restore comforts to him and to his mourners, creating the fruit of the lips. Peace. Peace to him who is far off, and peace to him who is near, said Jah, and I shall heal him. Now, lips speak from the overflow of the heart. What is the fruit of your lips? And the question here is your heart being sanctified? Is the word going to that place of the soul? And are you wrestling, and are you contending with it? Is your heart being circumcised? Is your mind being renewed? It's all the same. These are all metaphors for the same thing going on, this sanctification. Remember, your flesh will not get sanctified. It will be put to death. But your soul, your heart, your mind. Remember, what is Yah clothing? When we die and are resurrected, we're given a new body. So what is it that's making its way out? It's our soul with his spirit. And here Yah is saying, he's contrasting those in idolatry versus those that are bruised and humble and repentant. And that those people, the fruit of their lips is peace. And Yah's going to give it to them, peace. But the wrong are like the troubled sea, for it is unable to rest, and its waters cast up mud and dirt. There is no peace, said my Elohim, for the wrong. And this is one of the biggest giveaways and litmus tests of whether someone is doing their faith in religion in the flesh or not, is this, a lack of peace. It could be physically, like bad fruit, but it can be emotionally. If people are emotionally unstable and they've got no real reason to be. There's something not right. They're unable to rest. Notice here it says it's water cast up mud and dirt. So what ends up coming out is that scripture starts being twisted, right? So they don't have peace, always flip-flopping like this, you know, whether it be emotionally, doctrinally, like on and on and on. There is no peace for the wrong. So again, what if you're creating Elohim in your own image? What if you're staying in that fleshly place and it's not becoming living? Do you think you're going to have peace? Absolutely not. And let's keep going. Isaiah 32:13, weeds and thorn bushes come over the ground of my people indeed. What do thorn bushes represent in the parable of the sower? The thorns. The cares and worries of this life. Now, people automatically go to the cars, the bank account, you know, the riches. Yeah, that's part of it. How about the need to be accepted by men? How about the glory of men, people's opinion of you, the need to be right? Where does all this come from? It comes from self. It comes from the flesh, the cares of this world. Why is it that people try to climb the social ladder? Because they want to be loved and accepted by men. Weeds and thorn bushes cover the ground of my people, the cares of this life. Indeed, over all the houses of joy, the city of revelry. For the palace is abandoned, the crowded city deserted. Hill and watchtower serve as caves forever, a joy of wild donkeys, a pasture of flocks. Until the Spirit is poured out from us, upon us from on high. And the wilderness shall become a garden land, and the garden land be reckoned as a forest. Then right ruling shall dwell in the wilderness, and righteousness remain in the garden land. Now listen to this. The work of righteousness shall be peace, and the service of righteousness be rest and safety forever. It's telling you that peace comes through work and service. The work of righteousness, the service of righteousness. This is what brings peace. And my people shall dwell in a home of peace, and in safe dwellings, and in undisturbed resting places. Even when hail shall fall, felling the forest, and the city be brought low in humiliation. Blessed are you who sow besides all waters, who send out the foot of the ox and the donkey. It's by no accident that verse 20 is in the context of verse 17. The work of righteousness, the service of righteousness. Look, blessed are you who sow beside. The man who meditates on his Torah day and night shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, bearing fruit in due season. Sending out the foot of the ox and the donkey, what language is this? It's the tilling of the ground. It's the tilling of the ground. Work and service of righteousness, tilling of the ground. And this is why you have people out there that are remaining in the flesh, or they've not overcome at that soul level, and then go and try and help others. Oh, but I need to serve other people. You're dangerous. Until you've overcome, you are dangerous. You're broken. That's not a slight. It just is. At one point, I was broken. I hope you look. I'm now in a position where I can serve others. I wasn't quite a few years ago. I just wasn't. But I've grown to a place where the Father can go, you know what? And Michael, you're holding yourself accountable. You're not doing this out of my design, da-da-da-da-da. Now I can have it, but there's people like, and I get it, we want to help, we want to do this, but if we've not tilled the ground of our hearts and overcome, and we're now seeing the fruit of the Spirit in that, we're not ready to help people. There's always going to be someone that's in like, and again, this is the danger of making up the fruit. Or not having had someone gone before you, and then you're just left to make it up according to your own leavened understanding. Jeremiah 4, this tilling of the ground, what is it talking about? For this is what Yah said to the men of Yehudah and Jerusalem: break up your tillable ground. Do not sow among the thorns. So this thorn language, the cares of this world. And again, I want people to stop thinking about the bank account and the car. That should be obvious by now. How about wanting to please men, the need to be recognized, the need to be loved? Like, think these things, carnal desires. Break up your tillable ground. Like, Paul uses this analogy in Galatians. Elohim is not, do not be led astray, he actually says. Don't fool yourselves. Elohim is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that he shall also reap. But because he who sows to his own flesh shall reap corruption from the flesh. But he who sows to the Spirit shall reap everlasting life from the Spirit. So again, going back to what we were talking about, if you're doing your religion from the flesh, what are you going to reap? You're going to reap corruption. Whether it be on the charismatic side and you make up the fruit, the gifts of the Spirit, or whether it be on the Messianic Hebrew roots and you say, well, I must be doing really well because I have knowledge. Like, again, it manifests itself so many different ways, but it's all flesh. And Jeremiah, well, first, Paul is saying, don't be mocked, don't be fooled. You can be doing whatever you want in his name. If it's from the flesh, you're going to reap corruption. Circumcise yourselves unto Yah. Take away the foreskins of your hearts. Notice that the sowing among thorns and the cares, like he's saying, look, circumcise your heart, renew your mind, sanctify this. Like, it's the same thing. You men of Yehudah and inhabitants of Jerusalem, lest my wrath come forth like fire and burn with none to quench it, because of the evil of your deeds. And again, this is one of the, let's keep going. O Jerusalem, wash your heart from evil and be saved. Till when would your wicked thoughts remain within you? Go figure. Heart circumcision is an Old Testament concept. Who'd have thought it, right? Why? Because they were sowing among thorns. So, what are the dangers of walking in the flesh? What are the dangers of trying to live out religion as opposed to faith? What's the dangers of making up the fruit? Obviously, you start creating Elohim in your own image. Well, here's the problem with that. Their idols, the silver and gold, are the work of men's hands, okay? They have mouths, but they do not speak. They have eyes, but they do not see. They have ears, but they do not hear. They have noses, but they do not smell. They have hands, but they do not handle. They have feet, but they do not walk. They make no sound through their throat. The ones who make them shall become like them, all who trust in them. This is the danger of creating Elohim to your own, according to your own image. This is why it leads to delusion, okay? This is why it leads to delusion. You will become what you worship. You will become what you worship, right? Everyone knows you are what you eat. Well, now think of the spiritual principle to that. You will become what you worship. And this is why, actually, we tell people, stop focusing on the darkness. Stop trying to fight the evils of Rome. Stop trying to correct the system. Why? Because you're focused on darkness, and what you focus on, you will become. You know, this is why you see all these prophecy doomsayers and all of that. You know, or the more conspiratorial worldview, it will focus on that stuff long enough, it will come out of you. You will lose your peace. You will start focusing on the darkness more than Elohim, and then before you know it, the weird stuff starts to happen. You get funny ideas about Elohim. Creating Elohim in one's own image will cause spiritual blindness. Why? Because they have eyes, but they do not see. It will cause spiritual deafness, the inability to hear truth, reproof, and correction. Why? Because they have ears, but they do not hear. It leads to walking in one's own counsels. They have feet, but they do not walk. Remember, they're walking according to Elohim in their own image. It's amazing how when I've talked to these people that are kind of going down this road, it's like, you know, in my mind, I'm thinking Elohim sounds an awful lot like them. That's not like, sometimes I listen to people and my wife and I will talk and it's like, that's not the Elohim we know. That's not Elohim. So who is it? What is it? Jeremiah 7, the context is of Judah worshipping idols. And at this time, bear in mind, they're worshipping Yah as well. This is like, I know I mention this a lot, but people always miss this. They were worshipping Yah and idols. In fact, go read the beginning of chapter 7. They're saying, look, we've got the temple. We're all good. We've got the temple. The modern equivalent on our journey, on this side of the bank, is we have the Torah, we're all good. And then Yah says, you use that to bring shame on my name. Anyway, thus said Yah of hosts, the Elohim of Israel, add your ascending offerings to your slaughterings and eat meat. Do your fleshly things. Do your rituals. Go on. Do your religion. For I did not speak to your fathers or command them in the day that I brought them out of the land of Mitzrayim about matters of ascending offerings or slaughterings. But this word I commanded them. Obey my voice, and I shall be your Elohim, and you shall be my people, and walk in all the ways that I have commanded you, so that it be well with you. This is not saying that Yah he instituted the sacrificial system, but remember what it was. A type and shadow. It was something to teach them something. What Elohim really wanted was obedience from the heart. Like, can you see that the Israelites were doing the sacrifices and thinking, yeah, I'm all good, I'll just sacrifice my ox. You know, the Catholic equivalent is just whip yourself on the back and do your Hail Marys, whatever, you know, you'll be fine. Yet nothing, again, it's all flesh. How about, oh, well, I've read my Torah portions, I've got my tzitzit, and I didn't work on the Sabbath. Do you see how it can be used as religion? And what you're actually doing is taking his perfect word and dragging it through the mud. But they did not obey or incline their ear, but they walked in the counsels, in the stubbornness of their evil heart, and they went backward and not forward. Remember what I said, creating Elohim in your own image will do. Spiritual blindness, so you literally, like, you can read the scripture and you will twist it as you read it. You will have spiritual deafness, you won't be able to hear reproof or truth. Or when you hear there's been times people have said, oh, I listened to your teachings, Michael. I was like, wow, I would have never known. And remember that idols have feet, but they do not walk. So what do? You walk in your own counsels. Elohim's telling you the same thing here in Jeremiah. This is what idolatry leads to. From the day that your fathers came out of the land of Mitzrayim until this day, I have even sent to you all my servants the prophets, daily rising up early and sending them. But they did not obey me or incline their ear, but stiffened their neck. They did evil more than their fathers. And you shall speak these words to them, though they do not listen to you. And you shall also call to them, though they do not answer you. So again, you're seeing this. They've become like the things they've worshipped. Proverbs 1, the wise one hears and increases learning, the understanding one gets wise counsel. For understanding a proverb and a figure, the words of the wise and their riddles. So again, like, this is given to us to help us with the wrestling at the soul level, right? Remember, you hear the written words, and there's hear and do, shema. Something's got to occur between the hearing and doing. And this is where Yeshua gave us his pattern of discipleship. Now you drop down to the end And this is wisdom speaking. Remember that wisdom has to be wrestled for, right? Chazak. Because I called and you refused, I stretched out my hand and no one inclined, and you spurned all my counsel and would not yield to my reproof. Let me also laugh at your calamity, mock when your dread comes. When your dread comes like a storm and your calamity comes like a whirlwind, when distress and anguish come upon you. Let them then call on me, but I answer not. Let them seek me, but not find me. Remember that wisdom is the outcome of taking knowledge, wrestling with it, and overcoming. And that's where wisdom and authority comes. But if you're living in this religious, fleshly place, guess what you're not getting? Wisdom. Because they hated the knowledge. They hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of Yah. They did not accept my counsel. They despised all my reproof. Therefore, let them eat the fruit of their own way and be filled with their own counsels. Notice you're seeing the same things that are the result of idolatry. They're not listening. They're not seeing. They're walking in their own counsels. You're seeing someone that's creating Elohim in their own image there. For the turning away of the simple kills them, and the complacency of fools destroys them. This is not speaking of an unbeliever. This is speaking of someone being complacent. Mixture, okay? Proverbs 5:1, my son, listen to my wisdom, incline your ear to my understanding. For the lips of a strange woman drip honey, and her mouth is smoother than oil. So again, we're either, Babylon, right? This mystery of Babylon, this religious defilement that goes out. Now, this is the person that's been heeding the strange woman as opposed to the wisdom of his father. It says, I have not heeded the voice of my teachers, and I have not inclined my ear to those who instructed me. In a little while, I was in all evil, in the midst of an assembly and in a congregation. Essentially, what this is saying is just like that. Someone can end up in a whole world of hurt despite them being in an assembly, a good one at that. Why? Verse 13, they didn't heed wisdom. Now, again, remember what we've covered. If you're going to play your little religious bubble in the flesh, you will become what you worship, which means you'll become blind, deaf, and you'll walk in your own counsel. And then when people do try and warn, what happens? They don't listen. And what's the outcome? Just like that, you can end up in a world of hurt. You lose your peace. You lose your emotional stability. Like on and on, like you see the bad fruit from the bad decisions you've made in your life. Why? Lack of wisdom. You were creating Elohim in your own image. Don't be surprised. Matthew 13, and in them. Now, who's them? Yeshua is speaking of the Judah around him, like within the body context, he's saying. In them, the prophecy of Yeshayahu is completely filled, which says, hearing you shall hear and by no means understand, and seeing you shall see and by no means perceive, for the heart of this people has become thickened, right? And again, think of the tablets of stone. Because they've not broken up their tillable ground, the Spirit can't come and write the Torah on fleshly tablets, on the tablets of flesh. Their ears are hard of hearing, their eyes have closed, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, lest they should understand with their heart and turn back and I heal them. Yeshua is saying when people are in this place, they're not in a place of repentance. Walking out your faith from the flesh and playing the religious games will lead you to being not in a state of repentance, no matter how much you claim to keep the commands, because that word is not becoming living. As Yeshua would say, well do you search the scriptures. What you're seeing is spiritual blindness, deafness. you're seeing lack of repentance, you're seeing pride, stiff-neckedness, and it can happen just like that. It's so subtle, ever so subtle. Now, this led me down this line of thinking. Lest there should be among you a man or woman or clan or tribe whose heart turns away today from Yah our Elohim. What if you're creating Elohim in your own image, right? To go and serve the mighty ones of these nations, lest there should be among you a root-bearing bitterness or wormwood. And it shall be, when he hears the words of this curse, that he should bless himself in his heart. That's delusion. Saying, I have peace, though I walk in the stubbornness of my heart, in order to add drunkenness to thirst. Again, inability to hear truth. The thing that's supposed to be waking them up out of their senses is actually that they're going, oh, I'm fine. And again, remember what I said, like, people get in this place and, like, they literally don't have the ability to process reproof. Or the other thing that I've seen people do is that they'll take it very personally all of a sudden. They're like, oh, you hate me. Oh, you know, why are you being so... And it's like, whoa, I'm just like again, it's showing this emotional instability because either they just don't hear it, or they all of a sudden take it very personally. And there's it's very extreme behavior. There's no in between. Why? No peace. But this delusion is at the heart level. It's literally, in fact, I would say it's bouncing off the heart, it's bouncing off the mind. But the conscience has become seared, as Paul would say. Constant craving and desire, no peace. Notice what it says, in order to add drunkenness to thirst. Is you get the picture that's being painted is give me more, give me more, give me more, give me more, give me more. This is why you get a Torah Nazi. You'll get someone that gets really bent up on a doctrine and they just keep pushing. Like, they have to go around and convince everybody. We've seen this with the sacred namers. We've seen this with the calendar. Like, pick a doctrine that someone gets excited. Do you know what I mean? Like, it could be any doctrine. You have whole denominations that have been started like this on the Christian side over someone getting bent up on a doctrine and going around and trying to convert everybody to their way of thinking. Where is it coming from? It's adding drunkenness to thirst. Constant craving, and it has to go and it has to spill out, and no peace. And remember, if it's in a fleshly place, what does the flesh do? It lusts, it craves, it desires. Constantly trying to fill a spiritual void by fleshly means, and that's where it truly comes from. They're trying to fill a spiritual void by fleshly means, which means that deep down inside, if they were to be honest with themselves, they know something's wrong, but they will not humble themselves to either accept reproof or, counsel, or they won't humble themselves to go through the wrestling at the soul stage, which is difficult, and realize that maybe they've been creating Elohim in their own image. Look, this is the kind of stuff that can completely turn your paradigm around. It can destroy whatever little temple you've fabricated in your mind. And it can be quite traumatic for some people. So, I empathize, but I hope people are seeing what I'm trying to talk about. And this is why we get all these warnings by Paul. Paul's not making this stuff up. For there shall be a time when they shall not bear sound teaching, but according to their own desires. Again, where are the desires coming from? They're coming from the flesh. They shall heap up for themselves teachers tickling the ear. And they shall indeed turn away their ears from the truth. Why? Because they're becoming what they're worshipping, right? Which is God in their own image. And be turned aside to myths. Right? What is it that these people are desiring? Read this what is it that the people are actually desiring? They're desiring teachings. They're desiring spiritual food, but it has to please them. Can you see the delusion? They're trying to fill a spiritual void by fleshly means, but they want something that agrees with them. It's according to their own desire. Think back to what I was saying. What do the thorns represent? The cares of this world. And I said, put the cars and the bank accounts aside. How about the need to be right? The need to be accepted, and to be accepted at any cost. Right? Look, we all want to be loved. I get that. But at what point does it actually start to affect our behavior? These people they want something spiritual, but they want it to agree with them, which means they're creating it in their own image. These people, they actually desire and crave self-confirmation and self-validation for their position. Why? Because deep down inside, there's no peace. So they have to continually seek validation. Again, this is why you see it in the charismatic movement. They have to go and, I cast thee out, devil, and you need to be more spiritual. It's about how many people they can get to stand airy-fairy babbling. Why? Because they need confirmation that their delusion is truth. And this is why you see it now. Let's go on the Messianic Hebrew root side. People will get bent up on a doctrine and they have to force it up. Why? Self-confirmation, self-validation. Why? Because there's no peace. And this comes from, technically it's one thing, but I've broken it down into pride and self-worth issues. Self-worth issues are pride, but I talk about there's pride that is puffed up and arrogant, right? Oh, look at me. And then on the other side of the spectrum of pride is self-worth, self-condemnation. Oh, I need to be right. Oh, I'm not good. That's all coming from pride. It's all self, right? And that you get this spectrum of pride. One is arrogant, one is self, me, mopey. And throughout that spectrum, this is why people crave this. Like, they need confirmation and validation for their position. Again, I must be spiritual if I've got the same so-called gifts of the Spirit as them. I must be spiritual if I have all this knowledge. I must be doing well in my walk if A, B, and C. And you peel back away these layers and you realize that actually these people have no peace. They're emotionally unstable, on and on. Why? Because the word's not become living. It really is that simple. They've stayed in that fleshly place. And man, does it manifest some amazing ways. Look, to go at the soul level, to really wrestle with it, to contend, it's hard. It is hard. Why? Because of our flesh. Who here has found that the more they grow spiritually, the easier it is to heed reproof and counsel? And then every now and then, when the Father's doing quite a bit of circumcision, then we're like, oh. But who has noticed that? Why? Because your mind is being renewed. And the more you walk by the Spirit, the more you overcome, the more you want that in your life, no matter the cost. 2 Timothy 3, again, having a form of godliness but denying its power, turn away from these. For among them are those who creep into households and captivate silly women loaded down with sins, led away by various lusts. Look, when you see silly women, think spiritually vulnerable. The word actually in the Greek is foolish woman. Now, according to Proverbs, what is someone who's foolish? Someone that has no accountability, no counsel in their life, no wise counsel. Someone who is complacent, right? That's all that Paul is saying. Someone that's spiritually vulnerable. Now, the people that have a form of godliness deny its power. Remember what we've been covering. These people will have a lack of peace. And what they do, they have to go around and get people to agree with them. Why? Paul's telling you that this is the fruit of it. Why? Because there's no peace. They seek validation and confirmation of where they're at. Led away by various lusts. What are the lusts or the desires? The need to be loved, the need to be accepted, the need to be right. Always learning, never coming to the knowledge of truth. Again, like staying in that fleshly place. They're staying in the written word, and it's not going to the heart and thus overcoming. Here's the thing. Sometimes people literally do not know. Like they've not been shown a better way. So you need someone to come along and say, look, I've been where you've been before, brother. Having a spiritual appearance but staying in the shadow picture, thus the word not becoming living. Always seeking an ear to satisfy the desire and craving for self-confirmation and self-validation. Again, I see it on both sides and every flavor in between. Every flavor in between. But it's all self. Using religious practice, knowledge, and doctrine as a front. I think most people in this community will have heard me say people that will hide their lack of overcoming behind something. So what I mean by religious practice, again, think in charismania, you get all this false fruit and gifts of the Spirit. They use that as a front. Not, by the way, they're not 99.99999% of these people literally don't know better. They're deceived, right? They don't know that what they're entertaining is, but again, it's a front. Look, there's going to come a time when naming it and claiming it and washing it in the blood of Jesus isn't going to cut it anymore. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to be really surprised when they name it and claim it. Nothing's going to happen. What do you think is going to happen to their faith? Now let's go to the other side. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to realize soon enough that, they've got all that knowledge, but they're afraid of what's coming upon them. They have no peace. Again, the faith is supposed to change us at the soul level. And it's all a front. And most people don't even know that that's what they're doing. 2 Peter 2, but there shall also come to be false prophets among the people, as also among you. Now listen, among you shall be false teachers, who shall secretly bring in destructive heresies, deny the master who bought them, bring in swift destruction on themselves. So remember that denying the master is not just about denying him with your words. You can deny him with your deeds. And the whole time claim to serve him. Master, master, did we not do all these things in your name? Right? This is what Peter says. These are fountains without water. Think trees without fruit. Okay? Fountains are meant to give water which give life. These have no life coming out of them. Clouds driven by a storm, to whom the blackest darkness is kept forever. So again, clouds that don't produce rain. They're not giving life. Okay? They have the appearance of water, but there's no water in them. That's all Peter's saying. Trees without fruit. For speaking arrogant nonsense, they entice through the lusts of the flesh. Again, think the need to be right, the need to be like this self-validation, this self-confirmation. Through indecencies, the ones who have indeed escaped from those living in delusion, promising them freedom. You see this, right? Again, let's go to the charismatic side. You will overcome in the spirit. You are a warrior for Jesus. Cast the devils out. Promising them free. You have the spiritual authority. Every place that the soles of your feet walk on is yours, right? And then you actually peel through that veneer. Their lives are pretty screwed up. They're just as screwed up as Rome's, sometimes even more so. But again, what about those, let's use the knowledge-driven ones, the Gnostics, the Torah Nazis. They're like, oh yeah, you will be free, the blessings are coming your way. Yet they're just like dividing families, breaking marriages, like on and on. The fruit is the same. Though themselves being slaves of corruption, for one is a slave to whatever overcomes him. Again, we read this and we think like the really seedy, horrible, obvious sins. What about the need to be right? I've seen people go to amazing lengths so that they can feel they're right. I've seen people go to amazing lengths to seek validation for their faith. Like amazing lengths. That's far more destructive. Why? Because it's far more subtle. And they're a slave to it. It governs their life. Like this is why EAD or emotionally arrested development can actually be quite dangerous, because it can actually govern your life. You see people that have a moment and they just don't know how to react. And in that moment, they're governed by their EAD. Have I got news for you? If you don't wrestle with the word and then, go through that wrestling process, you will remain in your EAD. Have fun. But if after they have escaped the defilements of the world, through the knowledge of the Master and Saviour Yeshua Messiah, there are again entangled in them and overcome, the latter end is worse for them than the first. Michael, this is talking about people backsliding into binge drinking or, the really obvious sins. Come on, let's keep reading. For it would have been better for them not to have known the way of righteousness than having known it to turn from the set-apart command delivered unto them. For them, the proverb has proved true. A dog returns to his own vomit, and a washed sow returns to her rolling in the mud. This is why we say, get the leaven out. If you leave it, because... See, this is the thing as well. This is why discipleship and accountability is so important, because people will go to the place of wrestling, right? They wrestle, and something comes out, and they never deal with it. Whoever they're in so-called discipleship with is not equipped, has not seen this before, maybe making it up as they go, and something is brought out and it's never actually dealt with, so it festers, and it's never dealt with. How about being freed of the worldly flesh, only to be enslaved by religious flesh? You escape the defilements of the world through the knowledge of Master. So, you've stopped binge drinking, you've stopped taking drugs, you've stopped sleeping around, you've stopped smoking pot, great, wonderful, but now you're caught up in religion. Now you're caught up in using the Sabbath to whack people over the head, or using your favorite pronunciation of the name, or you're bent on this doctrine, or now you're just making up the gifts of the Spirit. It's all flesh. And this is all Peter is saying. You were freed from this, but you've not got your heart is still the same. So you've gone from being worldly fleshly to now being religiously fleshly. At least those in the world are not trying to pretend to be something they're not. At least they have integrity. Yeah, they're doing all the stuff they do, but they're not mincing their words about it. Yet we claim to be the children of Elohim. Do you see? All of a sudden, 2 Peter 2 can apply to, all of us. Go figure. The word is written to his body. The parallel passage to this in Jude, it adds an interesting detail. 2 Peter 2 and Jude they're almost very similar, but one adds something that the other doesn't, and so when you compare them, it's very interesting. But you, beloved ones, remember that the words spoken before by the emissaries of our Master Yeshua Messiah, because they told you that there will be mockers in the last time who would walk according to their own wicked lusts, right? These are the ones that are heaping upon themselves teachers. These are the ones, to tickle the ear. These are the ones that have a form of godliness, deny its power. They creep around seeking an ear, they're in the flesh. These are the ones who cause divisions, not having the Spirit. The letter kills, but it is the Spirit that brings life. The letter, and it's talking of look, why does the letter kill? Because we broke it. The letter of the law said, you shall not slander your neighbor. I think all of us have been guilty of that. You shall not worship any idols. I'm sorry, but all of us have worshipped an idol in our lives at some point. All of us. The letter kills. It will kill. This is why your flesh has to die. And technically, so does your soul. But what has he given us? A means to undergo the sanctification of the heart. Look, if you're not going to that battle place of the soul where you're contending with this, you've got no chance of going into walking in the Spirit, as it were, which means you're now a slave to your flesh. However that decides to manifest itself, whether it be in pride, self-worth issues, need to be right, on and on and on. Wicked lusts, pride, desire to be right, seeking validation from men as opposed to Elohim, which means that who are you really worshipping? Self-worth issues or puffing oneself up. People don't see that as a wicked lust. It is. The amount of destructive fruit I've seen from these things. And look, again, I could go on and on and on and on and on. I'm just trying to give people the principles. I have to speak very broadly. By the way, all of us have screwed up on this. All of us. I speak to myself first. Right, let's go back to Yeshua's words. John 5:37, and the Father who sent me, he bore witness of me. You have neither heard his voice at any time nor seen his form. By the way, he's speaking to the religious authorities here. These were people that prayed. These were people that studied the Torah. These were, and Yeshua is saying, you're fooling yourselves, guys. And you do not have his word staying in you because you do not believe him who he sent. Look, guys, a lot of these people have the Torah and the prophets committed to memory. And he's saying his word is not staying in you. He's being highly offensive. You search the scriptures because you think you possess everlasting life in them. And these are the ones that bear witness of me. But you do not desire to come to me in order to possess life. I do not receive esteem from men. Who were they seeking esteem from? Right? They've created Elohim in their own image. Now it's not going into the spiritual or even the wrestling form. They're now making the fruit up. For them, it was knowledge. Knowledge was the fruit. I have all this understanding, therefore I must be doing good. I'm a child of Abraham. Right? And then they were seeking validation from one another. Well, he believes the same as me, therefore I must be right. But I know you, that you do not have the love of Elohim in you. I have come in my Father's name, and you do not receive me. If another comes in his own name, him you would receive. How are you able to believe when you are receiving esteem from one another, and the esteem that is from the only Elohim you do not seek? I believe that it is to the glory of Elohim that some of us are actually undergoing this heart circumcision process. That's the esteem of Elohim I want to seek. That he could take me, the wretched sinner I was, and turn me into something of use. That's the esteem. I don't want the esteem of man. But a lot of us are driven by this, whether we believe it or not. Do not think that I shall accuse you to the Father. There is one who accuses you, Moshe, in whom you have set your expectation. For if you believed Moshe, you would have believed me, since he wrote about me. Notice, Yeshua is only reiterating everything we've just kind of covered, in the sense of, he's saying to the Pharisees, you've made God up in your own image, and now you're reaping the fruit of it, and this is what's going on. Remember what I said, you won't be able to see, you won't be able to hear, and you'll walk in your own counsels. The Pharisees literally couldn't see the prophecies being fulfilled in front of them, the Moedim, the spring Moedim being fulfilled, they couldn't see it. They couldn't hear the reproof that John the Baptist and Yeshua were giving them, and even the people. Even the people were saying, well, he must be the Messiah. They couldn't hear it. And boy, did they walk in their own counsels, to the point where they went and murdered him. They'd made Elohim. They'd remained in the flesh. But if you do not believe his writings, how shall you believe my words? Because you've become deaf, blind, and dumb, spiritually. So, let's start wrapping up. Hopefully this makes more sense now. You know, is the word becoming living? So we hear the written word. Knowledge, yes, look, there is a place where we have to hear the written word, and we have to understand the written word. There's I'm going to say this to all the people that are fairly new to this. It's okay. So it takes time to wrestle and to apply. Right? Again, let's use the Sabbath issue, right? You've all heard that I need to keep the Sabbath. It's going to take a while for you to find out what that is exposing in you. Is it exposing fear? Is it exposing an idol? Is it exposing a lack of trust, right? It takes time. And then when you apply it and you start walking in it, okay, then you get the spirit. Again, like headship, design of a marriage. It takes time to apply headship and design within a marriage. You don't undo like 20 years of usurping in a day or in a year. Right? So it's okay. We have to be, as children in the faith, we have to go here. He gave us the shadow picture for a reason. The crime is when we remain there. There's people that have been walking this faith out for 15, 20 years, and their life is full of bad fruit. Full of bad fruit. They're still the same person they were before they even, in fact, they're probably, they've got bitter now with it. Now they've added self-righteousness to it. They've added delusion to it. The crime is not coming as a child in this place. The crime is that if you're still there 10 years later, either there's an issue with you or there's an issue with where you're fellowshipping. Because remember, like, whatever the environment you're in, you should be growing. So there's an accountability, not only on the individual, but is the place you're fellowshipping at actually of Elohim? Is the power of the Ruach actually operating in that place? So it's two-way. Nothing more damaging than a leader in the body in this, like staying in the flesh and welcoming however many thousands of denominations. But hopefully this makes more sense. We hear the word, we wrestle with it, and again, discipleship was given to us to help us, equip us at the soul level. You know, sometimes it's going to take someone that's close to you to say, brother, I know that you don't want to do this, but why? What's actually driving this? Why? What's the real reason you don't want to give up your, what's the real reason you don't want to keep Shabbat? Or what's the, let's use the headship thing, brother. Why are you not taking up your headship? Is it fear? Are you lazy? Do you not know any better? But what is it, brother? You know, or for a sister to go to another woman and say, why are you not submitting? Is your husband actually shirking his responsibility, or have you not learned to let go of the reins? It's not fun going through that. You know, or what is it? Whatever justification you've made up in your mind of why something is acceptable or not acceptable on the Sabbath. Like, this is the place where we wrestle. And this is the place where either we'll submit to the flesh or to the spirit. But if you've never had anyone go before you, around you, wow. This is ultimately the choice between life and death. If I'm to sum it all up, if you want to stay in the flesh, that's your prerogative. But you remember what Paul said, God will not be mocked. You will reap according to what you sow, corruption from the flesh or life from the spirit. The letter kills, but the spirit gives life. But you need the letter. Remember that the written word is pointing to the weightier matter. Without the written word, you won't get the weightier matter. I'm sorry, Christianity, you won't. But to those to the Hebrews and the Messianics, if you stay in the written word, you won't get what it's pointing to. And it all happens at this interchange and this crossing of where soul, the body and the spirit fight. What will you do? What will you choose? All right, let's wrap this up. I've got one more thing. I was thinking about this teaching and all that. Made me think of, well, let's get there. Romans 8:1. There is then now no condemnation to those who are in Messiah, Yeshua, who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. There's no condemnation, which should make all of us do a double take on what we call our faith and ask ourselves, are we actually being religious? Or have we made it up in our own image? Or do we have wonky spirituality? For the law of the Spirit of the life in Messiah Yeshua has set me free from the law of sin and death. For the Torah being powerless in that it was weak through the flesh, Elohim, having sent his own son in the likeness of flesh and sin, and concerning sin, condemned sin in the flesh. Listen to this. So that the righteousness of the Torah should be completed in us who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. People read right over this, or completely misinterpret it. Paul is saying if you walk in the Spirit, the righteousness of the Torah will start to be completed in you. Think about that. But if you do it in the flesh, you're wasting your time, is what he's saying. I can only speak from my experience, but I'm sure this will resonate with some of you. As I have grown, and I have watched parts of his word and his covenant become living in my life, suddenly I realized that I'm getting to the place where I can start going, I think that may have been pleasing to the King. I'm seeing the righteousness of the Torah in my life. I'm not saying I'm a finished product. Like, I hope people hear where I'm coming from. So, again, let's use the Sabbath example. You can keep the Sabbath from the flesh. Tick, 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 look at me. Pride, 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 on and on and on. Or, you know, I'm not good enough. Look at how badly I kept the Sabbath, you know, blah, blah. Or you've overcome. You've learned to not put your trust in your bank account, but to put your trust in Yah, to fear Elohim, to put his ways, his appointed times first. And now you have the peace of it. You know, you guard the Shabbat, even from certain conversations. Why is that occurring in my life? Maybe because in that particular area, I'm starting to walk in the Spirit. The righteousness of the Torah starts to be completed. It's very interesting that you need the Spirit to attain the righteousness of the Torah. Now, who is the Word made flesh? Oh, yeah, it's Yeshua. Do you see, like, as we undergo this heart circumcision, renewing of the mind, that we start to become more like him? For those who live according to the flesh, set their minds on the matters of the flesh, but those who live according to the Spirit, the matters of the Spirit. For the mind of the flesh is death, but the mind of the Spirit is life and peace. Because the mind of the, again, think of the matters of the flesh, the need to be right, the need to be accepted, right? Because the mind of the flesh is enmity towards Elohim, for it does not subject itself to the Torah of Elohim, neither indeed is it able. And those who are in the flesh are unable to please Elohim. Now, let me make this point very clear. Subjecting oneself to the Torah happens at the heart level, not at the physical level, because your body will die. Ticking the box isn't subjecting yourself to it. Again, let's use the Sabbath issue. Why do you keep this? Like, have you gone through having to go, you know what, I may lose my job? Some of you submitted to the Spirit on that. You put your faith in Elohim. Now you're subjecting yourself to the Torah. Did you see the difference? Again, like, it's the same with, you know, I use the example of headship within a marriage. Husbands, are you loving and cherishing your wives and treating her second only to Yah? Are you? That's subjecting yourself to the Torah. Not, I've ticked my box. What does this have? I believe this ties into the righteousness of Messiah. Romans 8:4. I want to tie a few scriptures together, so that the righteousness of the Torah should be completed in us, who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. Now remember, Yeshua is the Word made flesh, okay? We know that the law of the Spirit of the life of Messiah, in that we're supposed to be growing in his image. But again, so the righteousness of the Torah is completed when we walk according to the Spirit. So why? 1 John 2:29, if you know that he is righteous, you know that everyone doing righteousness has been born of him. Again, is the word becoming living, is what I'm trying to say. Tie this to that. Not whether you have the Torah or an understanding of it, but is it becoming living in you? Is the righteousness of Messiah starting to come forth in your life? 1 John 3:3, everyone having this expectation in him cleanses himself as he is clean. Well, last time I checked, my Messiah died in the flesh and was given a new body. So obviously it wasn't the cleansing of his flesh. How is Messiah clean? He was sinless. His conscience, his soul was without sin. Jeremiah 4:14, O Jerusalem, wash your heart from evil, be saved. So when would your wicked thoughts remain within you? So when John is saying we ought to cleanse ourselves as he is clean, he's not talking about having a bath. He's talking about washing our evil, wicked hearts. Heart circumcision, renewing of the mind, tilling of the ground, which happens at that soul level. Matthew 23:25-26. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside they're filled with plunder and unrighteousness. Blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and the dish, so that the outside of them becomes clean too. And again, I mentioned this in the Spirit Man teaching. It's by cleansing the inside of the cup that the direct outcome of that is the outside is clean too. Fix your heart, your actions will soon follow. And it goes back to having the Torah written on your heart. Is it becoming living? Is it becoming living? Look, I can tell my wife till I'm blue in the face, I love you, darling. I love you, dear. But if I'm sleeping around, do I really love her? Do I? No, it has to come from the inside. Because I love my wife, I don't do all these shenanigans. The fleshly stuff is fixed because my heart is right. Clean the inside of the cup so that the outside is clean too. Matthew 5:20, for I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall by no means enter into the reign of the heavens. The Pharisees' righteousness was in the flesh. They'd created their own righteousness. They'd made Elohim in their own image. The word remained written and not living. It was written on tablets of stone and not on tablets of heart. It didn't circumcise on and on and on. It didn't renew their mind. They remained in the flesh. And Yeshua is saying your righteousness needs to be greater than that. It needs to be in the heart. That's where I want to see the righteousness. I believe this is tied to the righteousness of Messiah. And I'm not talking about, I'm not talking about his blood paying for our transgression. That's a separate thing. That's to do with salvation. I'm talking about us becoming conformed to the image of Messiah and walking in his character. Again, the written word needs to go to the soul, be wrestled with, need to be applied. It needs to expose what's in your wicked heart. And sometimes, in fact, almost all the time, you're going to need those around you to do that. Only then can you walk in the Spirit, in newness of life. Is this the process to becoming righteous as he is righteous? In fact, I'm just going to answer that for you. Yes, it is. If you stay in this place, good luck. Enjoy it. Your heart will not be changed. You will be the same as you were for as long as you remain in that place. His righteousness is at the heart level. Remember, Yeshua's flesh had to die so that he could be raised anew. It was at his soul. Flesh and blood does not inherit the kingdom. It just doesn't. What does his blood cleanse? It cleanses the conscience, or your soul, or your heart. That's what we're dealing with. Look, I'm going to say something very bold. This is my personal opinion, but I think this is what will separate a bride from a non-bride. I believe this is what will separate those that have no rewards at the judgment seat. Yes, they had the faith that Yeshua died for them, and it's through Yeshua that we have eternal life. But they didn't experience this. They didn't experience this. Thus, I can't trust you. The work of righteousness shall be peace, and the service of righteousness be rest and safety forever. Blessed are you who sow besides all waters, who send out the foot of the ox and the donkey. Tilling of the ground. The work of righteousness, to become righteous as he is righteous, through the sanctification of the heart. Matthew 28:18, and Yeshua came up and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go make taught ones of all the nations. What does he say after that? To teach them all that I have commanded you. And it's not all knowledge. You live it. It becomes living. Again, he's made this a team game. And Yeshua, himself gave some as emissaries, some as prophets, some as evangelists, some as shepherds and teachers for the perfecting of the set apart ones, to the work of service, to the building up of the body of the Messiah. Notice this work of righteousness, the service of righteousness. Here Paul's talking about the work of service to the building up of the body of Messiah, until we all come to the unity of the belief. By the way, that doesn't mean agreeing on every point of doctrine. And of the knowledge of the Son of Elohim, to a perfect man, fully developed, fully mature. They've dealt with the EAD. They've had their heart circumcised to the measure of the stature of the completeness of Messiah. These people are walking as Messiah walked. Thus, the righteousness of Messiah is being completed in them. Because they're walking in the Spirit, the righteousness of the Torah is being demonstrated in their lives. So that we should no longer be children. Our king's not going to marry a child bride, tossed and borne about by every wind of teaching, by the trickery of men in cleverness, unto the craftiness of leading astray, but maintaining the truth in love, that we grow up in all respects into him who is the head, Messiah. Look, I know this was a long teaching and there's a lot there. I'm trying to give you the principles of how this works. I don't have the time to go through every possible hypothetical situation, but I've given you the principles of how the word can go from written, you wrestle with it, it exposes things in you, and then you get to choose life or death, flesh or spirit, you know? But here's the thing, my job is not to dot all your I's and cross all your T's, so to speak. This is why the body needs to grow. You know, and so this is why I'm giving you the principles, and hopefully you can apply these in your life. But one thing I will say is that where the places in my life where I have seen the word become living, wow, it's just so powerful. It's life-changing. It really, and who can change the hearts of men but the Creator? The one who created us in the first place. And my desire is that we move from the flesh and we wrestle with it. And again, I really want to give an encouragement, especially to those that are new and kind of starting out. We all start in the flesh. We all start in the written word. We all have to start there. He's given that to us to point to something. But may we grow that we don't remain there. May we grow so that we can give that unto others, so that the body of Messiah can grow into him, the head. Amen?